Hi, what you are about to hear is information created, curated, and developed by our HI Human Intelligence team, led by Stephen Hailstrom. We then utilize our AI audio generation systems to then build the information into a wonderfully understandable interactive audio overview. Enjoy.
Usually when we think about the future of global agriculture, we picture like endless fields stretching to the horizon, right?
Oh, absolutely. Giant automated tractors or, those sleek vertical farming towers glowing with those purple LED
Yeah,
lights.
exactly. But today, for this deep dive, we are looking at a staggering transformation coming from a totally different direction. I mean, we're talking about a microscopic organism,
Hmm.
something most people just casually dismiss as pond scum, basically.
Right, just green muck.
Yeah. But it is quietly positioning itself to replace millions of acres of traditional farmland. And in the process, it's completely disrupting a $2.5 billion global lipid market.
Which is massive. It is. And, that matters to you listening because you interact with that lipid market every single day. The cooking oil in your kitchen, the lotions in your bathroom, the biofuels powering commercial transport. These are massive foundational commodities.
It's a profound shift, really.
Yeah.
And for this deep dive, we're examining exactly how that shift is happening. I mean, we are moving entirely away from the realm of like speculative science fiction and those niche, small-scale algae microfarms.
Right, the little boutique setup.
Exactly. Instead, we are looking at macro-industrial execution. So to do that, we're analyzing the broader market data alongside a highly specific show-ready project. It's called the Northumberland Industrial Biorefinery, or NBRI, located in Eastern Ontario.
Okay, Eastern Ontario, got it.
Yeah, we're going to look at their specific business, scientific, and engineering models to see exactly how this sci-fi concept of, well, brewing oil in steel vats is being engineered into a highly profitable $97.8 million Canadian reality.
Wow. I just love when we get to look at the actual blueprint of how the future is being built. But before we get into the heavy engineering and the biology of how they are growing this algae, we really need to understand why the market is suddenly so hungry for it.
Oh, absolutely. The why is crucial here.
Right. And specifically, how NBRI's strategy completely flips the traditional algae business model on its head. Because when you look at the sources, the global algae oil market is valued at roughly $2.5 billion right now. And is projected to hit, what, $3.5 billion by 2034?
Yeah, 3.5 billion.
But 40% of that market is entirely locked up in soft gels. I mean, it's nutraceuticals. It's mostly just people taking their daily omega-3 supplements.
And that is the core of the issue right there.
Mm-hmm.
The industry right now is experiencing what the sources call a philosophical schism.
Oh, schism. Yeah.
Yeah. On one side, you have the traditional players. They are really focused on a protein-first model, attempting to create specialty ingredients for like alternative dairy, or they're running an omega-3 boutique model.
Chasing the high margin stuff.
Exactly. High value, but very, very low volume targets. Think infant formula or premium aquaculture feed. Their entire business model revolves around getting the absolute maximum price per drop of oil.
Which, I mean, that makes sense if you are a startup trying to show early revenue, but it limits your scale completely. You can only sell so much infant formula.
It does. And NBRI recognized that exact limitation. They are taking a commercially aggressive lipid-first model. They aren't trying to make a boutique supplement. They are targeting bulk, high-oleic algal oil, or HOAO for industrial food, commercial frying, cosmetics, biofuels.
The heavy hitters.
Right, we're talking about a massive 3,000 metric tons per year of output, which is projected to generate over 16.5 million Canadian dollars annually in revenue just from the oil alone. What's fascinating here is the defensive genius of that strategy.
Defensive genius? How so?
Well, if you chase the protein-first model for human food, you have to spend an absolute fortune on research and development just to mask the flavors. Because traditional algae protein can taste, well, very much like a swamp.
Oh, yeah. Nobody wants their morning plant-based milk tasting like a fish tank. I mean, I remember trying some of the early alternative dairy products years ago, and they had this distinct, earthy, almost muddy aftertaste.
Yes, the swamp notes.
Companies had to dump so much sugar and vanilla into them just to make them drinkable.
Precisely the problem.
Yeah.
It requires constant R&D and massive consumer marketing budgets to convince people to buy it. But lipids, fats, and oils are a functional commodity. A highly refined high oleic algal oil has zero flavor profile risk.
It just tastes like oil.
Exactly. It's completely neutral. It just does its job conducting heat in a commercial fryer or providing the base for a cosmetic formulation without needing some massive marketing campaign to explain away a weird aftertaste. It plugs directly into existing industrial supply chains with incredibly low friction.
Okay, let's unpack this. It sounds like the traditional algae industry has been acting like a highly exclusive boutique, right? Selling expensive, artisanal craft beer in tiny bottles. You have to convince people they want it, you market the unique notes, and you only sell to a small fraction of the population.
That's a great analogy.
But NBRI is looking at that and saying, we don't want to run a boutique. We want to build the municipal water supply. They just want to turn on the tap and supply the absolute baseline functional commodity that massive global industries already need every single day.
That is an excellent way to frame it. They're capturing the spread between high-cost niche ingredients and massive bulk commodity demand. But to be the municipal water supply, to be that bulk supplier, you need industrial reliability.
You can't have your water supply drying up on a Tuesday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You cannot have fluctuations in your output. And that is where the biology gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because traditional algae farming relies on massive open-air ponds.
Which, honestly, always seems so counterintuitive to me. I mean, open ponds sound nice and natural, but you are completely at the mercy of the elements, like a sudden heat wave, a cold snap, or even just local wildlife getting into the water could ruin an entire batch.
Oh, easily. Open ponds are highly susceptible to contamination from local bacteria or just invasive strains of wild algae blowing in on the winds. Plus, you're entirely dependent on the weather and sunlight.
Yes.
The sources refer to this as the risk of first-of-a-kind biological failures. You simply cannot guarantee a consistent institutional-grade harvest if a cloudy week can wipe out your whole crop. So NBRI bypasses this completely.
They bring it indoors?
Yes, they bring the entire operation inside to put the algae in massive steel tanks, and they feed it sugar.
Wait, they take away the sunlight entirely, which kind of blows my mind because when you think of algae, you think of photosynthesis. You think of green plants needing the sun to survive. How does a plant survive in a dark steel tank?
Well, they are using closed, sterile photobioreactors, operating under strict aseptic conditions to keep any outside bacteria out. And they use a biological process called heterotrophic fermentation.
Heterotrophic fermentation.
Right. Instead of relying on sunlight for energy, the algae are fed liquid dextrose, which is basically a high-grade corn syrup. And they source this dextrose directly from regional wet milling facilities, like Ingredients Cardinal plant right there in Ontario.
Wait, so they are just brewing it like beer?
Very much like brewing beer in a massive industrial brewery. And the fermentation process happens in two distinct phases to maximize the yield. So first you have the cell growth phase. Here, the algae are given a beautifully balanced diet of nitrogen, phosphorus, and that corn dextrose.
Okay.
The goal here is just rapid multiplication. They want the cells to divide as fast as possible until they hit a specific target density, specifically 100 grams per liter of dry cell weight.
So they're basically just building the workforce, getting as many individual algae cells into the tank as possible?
Precisely. Once that critical mass is reached, they initiate the second phase, the lipid accumulation phase. And this is where the real biological alchemy happens. They deliberately restrict the nitrogen in the tank, but they keep feeding the algae the corn dextrose.
Wait, let me make sure I'm following this. They cut off the nitrogen, which is the nutrient they need to grow and multiply, but they keep pumping in the carbs. Why?
To force a survival response,
Mm-hmm.
the starving algae essentially panic. They realize they don't have the nitrogen required to divide and reproduce anymore, so the cellular division stops completely.
Oh, wow.
But they're still swimming in all this carbon energy from the dextrose. So they take that carbon and convert it directly into fat. In scientific terms, they synthesize triacylglycerol, which is just the structural chemical name for standard, highly stable fat molecules.
They just start hoarding it.
Yes. They stockpile this oil inside their cell walls to survive what they perceive as a coming famine. This intentional starvation pushes the lipid content of the cell to over 60% of its total weight.
That is brilliant. It's like a bear gorging on berries right before winter. The bear knows the cold is coming, so it stops worrying about growing taller and just converts every single calorie into thick, dense layers of fat to survive hibernation. The algae are doing the exact same thing on a microscopic level.
That is biologically accurate, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the end product is incredible. This high oleic algal oil boasts a smoke point of 270 degrees Celsius.
That's high.
Very high. For context, conventional vegetable oils usually break down, start smoking, and become toxic between 200 and 230 degrees. Plus, it has absolutely zero trans fats. It just vastly outperforms conventional seed oils on a functional industrial level.
I gotta push back here, though, because I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, wait a minute. We are taking corn, putting it through a milling plant to process it into corn syrup, shipping it to a facility, and feeding that corn syrup to algae in a giant metal tank, all just to make oil.
Yeah.
Isn't this just corn oil with extra steps? Like, why not just press the corn and use the corn oil? Why go through this massive, expensive fermentation process?
It is a completely fair question, and honestly, it's the exact question skeptics always ask. The answer lies in a concept the sources refer to as nutrients.
Nutrients.
Yes, nutrients is the unique ability of these specific microalgae to concentrate nutrients at levels that traditional land plants simply cannot match. Yes, you are feeding them corn dextrose, but the algae aren't just passing the corn through their system, they are biologically upgrading it.
Upgrading it how?
Well, when you press raw corn for oil, you get corn oil, and the leftover cornmeal has about 23% crude protein. But when you harvest this algae, not only do you get this highly stable 270-degree smoke point oil, but the leftover algal biomass, the shell of the cell, so to speak, has 36.5% crude protein.
Over 36%. That is a massive protein upgrade from the original corn.
It really is. It matches or even exceeds high-grade soy protein. And even better, it is inherently non-allergenic, completely gluten-free, and soy-free. It provides a clean label, hyper-dense nutritional profile that you could just never get by squeezing a kernel of corn. You are using the algae as a microscopic biological factory to transform a basic, cheap carbohydrate into premium industrial fats and premium protein simultaneously.
I love that phrase, a microscopic biological factory. And hey, for you listening, if you are the type of person who wants to see the exact stoichiometric chemical formulas for that cell growth phase, because we actually have the underlying math on how carbon, oxygen, ammonia, and phosphate convert into biomass and triacylglycerol, don't worry about trying to visualize a massive chemical equation right now while you're driving or making coffee.
It's a lot of math.
It is. Just reach out to the HI Human site. They would love to send you the full technical breakdown so you can geek out on the stoichiometry on your own time.
It really is beautifully elegant chemistry. But, chemistry is only part of the equation here. We have the biology sorted, but we have to look at the engineering and the economics.
Right, the real-world application.
Exactly. Running massive, closed, sterile bioreactors, keeping them perfectly agitated and keeping them cool during fermentation, it requires a staggering amount of energy. Historically, a major restraint on the global algae market has been this exact issue. You can grow the best algae in the world, but if your electricity bill to run the vats bankrupts you, the project fails.
Which was exactly what I was wondering. Running a $97 million facility to 147 sounds like it would require a dedicated power plant. How do they bypass that energy hurdle without destroying their profit margins?
It comes down to geographic destiny and incredibly clever engineering. So the facility is located in eastern Canada, right on the Highway 401 corridor.
Right.
First, this places it exactly adjacent to its corn dextrose pipeline, which entirely eliminates the massive transportation and freight costs that eat away at the margins of their international competitors.
That makes sense.
But second, and more importantly for the energy question, they are integrating a hydroelectric microgrid right into the facility itself.
A microgrid. Okay, so they aren't pulling from the local power plant. They are actually generating their own power on site.
Yes. They are locating the facility at a historic mill pond dam. Hundreds of years ago, people used mill ponds to power physical grinding stones for flour, right?
Yeah, the old water wheels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
NBRI is taking that same geographical advantage and installing a modern Archimedes screw generator, or ASG.
An Archimedes screw. I mean, I am picturing that ancient Greek invention, like the giant metal corkscrew inside a pipe that they used to pump water up a hill for irrigation.
That is exactly the technology, but working in reverse. So instead of using energy to turn the screw and push water up the hill, they're letting the natural gravity-fed flow of the river fall down through the screw.
Oh, wow.
The weight of the water turns the blades, generating electricity. It is brilliantly efficient. It costs between 3,000 and 6,000 Canadian dollars per kilowatt of capacity to install, which is highly competitive for energy infrastructure, and it operates at a 70 to 80% river-to-wire efficiency.
And because it's a river, it doesn't just work when the sun is shining.
Crucially, yes. Unlike intermittent renewable energy like wind or solar, where you have to buy massive, expensive battery banks to keep the facility running if the wind stops blowing or the sun goes down, this ASG provides continuous 247 baseload generation.
That is huge for a 247 facility.
It handles all the baseline cooling and agitation requirements for the fermentation tanks round the clock. And because the screw operates at a very low rotational speed and has these large open buckets of water moving through it, it is completely fish-friendly.
Fish-friendly.
Yeah, aquatic life can pass right through the turbine without injury,
Oh.
which perfectly satisfies the ecological requirements of the local conservation authorities.
It is brilliant. So what does this all mean for the actual cost of the oil? We have this hyper-efficient biology, we have the localized corn syrup pipeline preventing transportation costs, and we have a fish-friendly 247 continuous hydroelectric screw powering the building. How does that translate to the price per kilogram?
The math is very compelling. Thanks to the cheap micro-hydropower and the localized supply chain, their gross production cost is $6.60 Canadian per kilogram of that high oleic algal oil. But they drive their net cost of production down to an incredible $5.30 per kilogram.
Wait a second. If it costs them $6.60 to make the oil, how do they drop the cost by over $1 a kilo after they've already made it?
By selling the leftovers.
The 36% protein biomass we talked about earlier.
Exactly. But even with free river power, a $97 million facility doesn't become highly profitable just by saving on electricity. You have to squeeze out every possible penny. Which leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, the zero-waste economics.
The whole crop strategy.
Yes, every single gram of the algae must be monetized. After they extract the 3,000 metric tons of oil, the facility is left with 1,957 metric tons of spent algal biomass every single year.
Almost 2,000 tons of leftover algae dust. I mean, that sounds like an expensive waste disposal nightmare. Don't tell me they just dump it in a landfill.
Not at all. They sell it to two very eager, high-paying markets. First, for a global aquaculture feeding farm fish, it sells for about $1,480 per ton. But the real premium is in the plant-based alternative protein sector. For plant-based meat binders, this spent biomass sells for a staggering $3,200 per ton.
$3,200 a ton. I have to stop you there. Why on earth is a meat alternative company paying that astronomical price for the empty shells of spent algae?
Because of the structural texture they can create with it, and crucially, how it tastes. To make these meat binders, the facility uses a process called high moisture extrusion cooking, or HMEC.
HMEC. Okay, how does that work?
They take this spent algal meal, hydrate it, and push it through a twin-screw extruder at very high temperatures, around 140 degrees Celsius. The intense mechanical shear and heat actually unfold the native proteins. Then, it's pushed through a long, specialized cooling die.
What does the cooling die do exactly?
The sources refer to the die creating a laminar flow. In plain English, this is a smooth, uninterrupted, highly streamlined cooling channel. Because the flow is perfectly uniform, as the proteins cool down, the chains are forced to cross-link and align into a fibrous, muscle-like tissue architecture.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, it closely mimics the stringy striations you see when you pull apart a piece of cooked chicken or beef.
Okay, so the extrusion cooking forces it to physically feel like real meat. That solves the texture problem. But what about the flavor? We established earlier that algae usually tastes like a swamp. If you're making a burger out of this, wouldn't it taste terrible?
This is the biochemical ace up their sleeve. This specific algal biomass is naturally packed with glutamic acid. Now, without getting too bogged down in the chemistry, glutamic acid is an amino acid that functions as a direct building block for a very specific flavor profile, umami.
Umami. That rich, deep, savory, meaty taste. It's what makes a steak taste like a steak, or mushrooms taste so earthy and savory.
Yes. It appeals directly to the ancestral human palate. When plant-based meat companies use soy or wheat as their base binders, those ingredients have a lot of off notes, weird, chalky flavors that have to be aggressively masked.
Right. They just taste like cardboard sometimes.
Exactly. Companies dump massive amounts of artificial flavors and synthetic sodium into their products just to hide the taste of the soy. But this algal biomass inherently provides a natural, hearty, savory flavor profile right out of the vat. It completely eliminates the need for artificial flavor masking. It is a massive biochemical advantage that allows NBRI to command that premium price point.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. When you look at the history of industry, this mirrors the early oil refineries perfectly. Back in the day, Standard Oil refineries started out just making kerosene for lamps, right? That was the core product.
Right.
And in the refining process, they had this highly volatile, annoying waste product left over that they didn't know what to do with. That waste product was gasoline.
Wow.
Once the automobile was invented, they realized their waste was actually incredibly valuable, and it completely changed the economics of the entire global energy industry. NBRI is doing the exact same thing. They are building an oil refinery for algae. The high oleic is their kerosene, the bulk driver. But the leftover protein biomass isn't just waste, it's their gasoline. It's a high-value co-product that radically changes the profitability of the entire plant.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see exactly why the financial architecture of this project is so resilient. This isn't just an environmental whim, though it certainly is, that by bypassing traditional land use and avoiding controversial seed oils, it is a highly sophisticated market arbitrage.
Market arbitrage, yeah.
By stacking the reliable revenue from the bulk oil with the massive premium revenue from the umami-rich protein binders, the financial model secures a 14.2% levered equity internal rate of return and an 18.4% post-tax project IRR.
Okay, throw me a lifeline on the financial jargon. What does that actually mean for the people funding this?
In plain terms, it means they are proving to investors that this project prints money. The levered equity IRR is the actual reliable cash return on the money investors put in, even after factoring in all the loans, the debt, and the taxes. It shows that this isn't just a green energy science experiment hoping for a subsidy, you know.
Right, it has to stand on its own 2 feet.
It's a highly lucrative, structurally sound business model. And that financial viability is heavily validated by the fact that they have already secured a $10 million public funding stack. The government and institutional levels have looked at this closed-loop model, verified the math, and cleared the path for rapid commercial scaling.
It really is a masterclass in stacking efficiencies. I mean, they didn't just solve the biology problem by moving it indoors, they solved the energy problem with the Archimedes screw, the logistics problem by sitting on the 401 highway next to a corn syrup pipeline, and the waste disposal problem by utilizing extrusion cooking to make premium meat binders.
It's all connected.
It's solving the old scale versus value paradox of the algae industry, not with one magic bullet, but by layering all these different engineering and biological models together seamlessly.
It is a remarkable synthesis of disciplines. And this raises an important question, something for you to think about long after we wrap up today.
Oh, I like a good thought experiment.
If this closed-loop bioindustrial arbitrage succeeds at this scale, and all the math and the shovel-ready blueprints suggest it will happen to traditional agricultural land values, what happens to the global agricultural economy when our most critical food and fuel components are no longer grown in massive weather-dependent fields across thousands of acres, but are instead brewed inside metal vats, powered by ancient river currents, sitting quietly next to highway corridors?
That is a wild thought to leave on. We are literally watching the physical footprint of global agriculture shrink into a single steel building.
Thank you for listening. Please reach out to our human side for a transcript or other details about this discussion. Or to ask a question, we are happy to explain or help with any issue concerning this podcast. We can be reached by email at action@themodularsolution.com or by cell or text at 16473-909036. Thank you for listening.